بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين. All right, so welcome everyone. Our guest today is Khizer Husain, and he is a cousin of mine, and we actually have connections with some of the previous speakers as well. So Abbas Bandali, when he had mentioned that he participated in a investing club, that was his Khizer's parents back in Champaign, Illinois, many years ago. And then the person who introduced me to yesterday's, or like the Sunday speaker, was Khizer's older brother Salman. He's the one who sent me the text with the story in the New York Times about God's emissaries. So a lot of crossovers. I sent you all a bio of Khizer's work, and I think we need a kind of like a translation of that to understand maybe what you do. So why don't we start with that? Can you tell us a little bit about what you do, and then we can try to understand that, and then maybe get into how you got there, and I don't know, just advice you have gleaned from your experiences along the way.
Sure. First of all, thank you so much for this platform. This is so exciting. I really enjoy spending time with young folks, and anyone who is younger than me, I consider young and vibrant. So I will start by talking about where I am right now, and then we can do any chronological work. I'm at a public charter school called Two Rivers. Public charter schools, if you're not familiar, it's a flavor of public schools. So those are government-funded schools. There is no screening criteria for students to enter the school. And the school that I work at is in Washington, D.C. Actually, if you go on the roof of one of our elementary school buildings, you can see the Capitol. The work that I do, so my official title is Senior Director of External Relations. In a nutshell, it's essentially opening the doors to the school to individuals, folks, educators, policymakers, funders. We are a school that is considered Title I, so it qualifies as a needy school. We have a super diverse demographic. Racially, we're like nearly 60% African American, 25% white. And we also have a pretty high special education population, at least 20% in any given year. All that to say is we're kind of like a microcosm of America in one school. Like you have the uber rich, the folks that have a house on Capitol Hill, as well as some waterfront property that they put on Airbnb. And then there is a sizable homeless population. And our staff also come from those backgrounds. Just this morning, one of our staff members said that she lost the love of her life, her fiance, to gun violence. So those are all the realities that our school is dealing with, and that I am kind of at the forefront in terms of being on the senior leadership team.
Doesn't a principal usually do that kind of a role, be the interface with the school and outside? Are you across kind of part of the principal's job?
We have two elementary schools and a middle school. So we're essentially our own school district. So if you consider like the executive director to be the superintendent, and the superintendent has kind of a cabinet, I would be part of that cabinet. And then principals are kind of the general managers of their own schools. So they have a lot of latitude in running their own schools, but at the same time, some things are decisions are at the network level. Like
Is
the
your
budget,
expertise?
budget
You're not in education, I think. You're in like management, or what is your expertise that you bring to the school?
Yeah. So you'll recall from Minhaj Bhai's conversation, he came kind of like the traditional route. Like a lot of people start out as classroom teachers, and then they find themselves going up the administrative ranks if that's what they want, and kind of find a place there. I came in, so chapter one in my life was getting to the doors of medical school, because I actually I really enjoyed the hard sciences, and like I was good at it, and why not? And it was kind of like, hey, there's a lot of stability there. And then I had an opportunity to study abroad through a Fulbright scholarship, and I studied public health and health systems. So that allowed me to think more broadly and think more broadly about impact. So I withdrew from medicine and went the route of building organizations and helping organizations scale up domestically. And then when that got a little boring, then internationally. And then
These are health organizations, right?
These were health organizations. Yeah, exactly. And then the parlay to education was like, one day I went to an alum event for my public health school. So actually going to those alumni events sometimes just yields like the most interesting things. And next to me was this woman who had started a database of fellowships. And she said, I have this beta version, you want to test it out? And so I did. And I saw this really cool fellowship opportunity called Education Pioneers, which takes people from consulting, banking, like those corporate leadership, like management type roles, and places them within education. So it's kind of like Teach for America, if you're familiar with Teach for America as a conduit for people who maybe studied African-American studies, but not education in college, but they decided, oh yeah, actually, I want to be a teacher. And then they become like a pipeline to needy schools. This is sort of the same, but within management of education. So whether that is at the Department of Education or it's at a particular school. And so I chose to land at a school because I didn't know anything about schools. But then this school was particularly important and kept me there for the last 10 years because it's the ability to be have students like every day as part of your life. Like I can walk in and sit in on a classroom conversation about spiders, and like later on in the day help lead a delegation of Latin American state ministers of education come and understand like how do you manage an environment that is rich in terms of social emotional learning. So it's the ability to kind of toggle very quickly between those levels that keeps me excited and interested. I'm happy to take.
Mohammed, why don't you ask your question?
Sure. You mentioned, I don't know if I missed this, but you mentioned that your school is in the capital. Did you mean any state capital, or do you mean Washington, D.C.?
Washington, D.C.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Our nation's capital. In fact, funny story, my first day on the job, we have this thing called community meeting. It's a weekly ritual where that particular school comes together, and it's a student-led, not quite an assembly, but like there's a chance to celebrate learning. And there is a senator from Louisiana who was just part of that, and she just dropped by. She didn't have an entourage or anything. She just came to say hey and see how the school was functioning, because she was also like a big advocate of charter schools and helped us land our property. But I thought that's kind of neat when there's a definite advantage in geography. We tend to have like all sorts of visitors just because of our proximity to the capital.
So usually schools are divided by different things. So you'll have a school that in a rich area, and everyone tends to be rich and from a certain demographic, and you have inner city schools. So how is it that your school is diverse in such a such a way?
Yeah. No, fantastic policy question. And I think it is well, it's because it's a charter school and because the law in DC, like probably the biggest gift of Newt Gingrich, I can't believe I'm saying this, but like a positive from Newt Gingrich is that he was able to push charter, like a legislation that allowed charter schools in DC. And charter schools in DC means that anyone who resides within the district in any part, any corner of the district is able to get a seat in a school, like unless there is more demand than seats, then it goes through a lottery system. So DC is divided into 8 wards, and we pull from all 8 wards. So some of the poorest parts of town and some of the richest parts of town.
So that's you're saying because it's a charter school, they have to pull from different districts, or even a public school has to do that?
No, well, traditional public schools, even in the district, are based on the boundary system, right? So that's why only rich people can live in a particular geography, because the real estate prices are jacked up, because everybody wants to be in that space to go to that particular school. With the law in DC, like the entire catchment area is the District of Columbia. So you can live anywhere, and as long as you can bring your child to the school. And by the way, we have universal early childhood education. So it's 3-year-olds and 4-year-olds are also part of the public school system. So parents don't have to spend an arm and a leg on some private Montessori program.
And can you just explain what a charter school is?
Yeah. So it's like the original intent. So early 1990s, an academic in Minnesota said, we need some laboratories of innovation within public education, because structurally the way the system is created, you're just going to perpetuate the same thing. Like the people that join the school board are people who are from that community, and they probably really love their school. That's why they're involved with the school, which means that they'll perpetuate the same types of things, even if those things are not amazing. Like we know as a nation, we pay too much attention to high school sports and not enough to like different elements of the program. But like those things are like emotionally what still survives in us, right? Like it's a primal type thing. So charter schools were designed to be like, hey, we'll have application, like people will create a charter, like a document to say this school is of this flavor. So it's a language immersion school, or for us, it's a project-based learning school, or you might have a Montessori school. And complete a rigorous application. It's over 100 pages. It takes more than a year to really do justice to fill it out. And then there's a rigorous like interview process for it to be accepted. Once an application is accepted, then every 5 years there is a renewal process. So charter schools have the benefit of a lot of autonomy. The funding is on a per pupil basis. So if you're able to have full capacity in your school, then you get a price per like a increment per child. And that's adjusted based on special education needs and some other needs. And we make all of our staffing decisions. Our school is not unionized. We have a lot of flexibility in curricular supports and all of that. And at the same time, there's a high degree of accountability. If our re-enrollment rates are not high, or if we have an absurd number of suspensions, or our students are not performing at a strong academic level, the school gets shut down, which is so difficult to do in a traditional school. Like you'll have just chaos if people say like this school is failing, we need to get rid of it.
There's some debate with Betsy DeVos, like charter schools or kind of undermining public schools. How is that dynamic, and how does your school also undermine, or is there something to counter offset that undermining power?
Yeah. I'll say Betsy DeVos is was probably like the most famous, infamous Secretary of Education probably ever. And I think she was particularly polarizing because she was a huge advocate for school vouchers.
Right.
And I'll get to charters, but school vouchers are essentially the ability to take public money and put them in the hands of parents to decide which school they should send their child to.
Let me just explain. So, do you all realize like your parents pay property tax? And property tax is quite high. It's a huge amount. Like in our area, it's like 9,000, 10,000, 11,000. It's quite a high amount that you pay annually. And a large portion of that, maybe like, I don't know, 70, 80% of that goes towards your public school. Maybe I don't know what the percentage is, but some huge percentage of that goes to your public school. So whether or not you have kids in school, everyone in the area pays those taxes, and those go to support the public school, the public library, other public things. And so someone who's old, for instance, doesn't have any kids, they may say, well, that's not fair. I don't want to pay taxes for that, right? And then if I'm going to pay for a private school, my kids are going to go to a private school, then also I'm paying double. I'm paying for the public school system, and I'm paying for private school, which is extremely high. So then they came up with a system of vouchers that you can basically, I guess, almost like get the money back from your taxes, and now use that voucher and pay for a private school or pay for a charter school. So you're not paying double, and your money's going to where your kid's going. But that undermines, like, the people who can do that are not the poor people who need the public school system, because the public school system is really great, but it needs a lot of funding. But if you suck the money out and put it into private schools and these kinds of things, then it leaves the public school system very weak and unable to do what it's supposed to do.
Yeah, absolutely. So in DC, funding per student is roughly $16,000 per child. So in a voucher world, I, as a parent, could take that $16,000 and send my kid to my amazing, like full-time Islamic school. So Betsy DeVos's supporters are mostly conservative Christians, and it becomes like this amazing windfall for them, like being able to support those schools. And you could argue for any religious community, like this is fantastic. Like now I don't have to like pay twice. My taxpayer dollars are actually going where they need to be. And then you have like, yes, this societal question of access, and if education is like one of the last few bastions that is designed to be some sort of equalizer in opportunity in America, what does that look and feel like? The issue with the vouchers in particular is that private schools do not have to take state assessment exams, your Iowa Test of Basic Skills or PARCC or Smarter Balance. Like none of these apply to private schools. So you're essentially allowing a government slush fund to private organizations and then no accountability associated with that. So fantastic for the schools, really terrible for taxpayers, in my opinion. With charter schools, it's different. It's like, it is still part of the public school system. We at Two Rivers cannot screen away a child. Even if the child has a pretty high level of disabilities, we are not legally able to say, no, we cannot serve your child. The answer is always, yes, send your child here, and then we'll figure it out. And then, parents can make the decision. But that option of screening a child based on academic ability, or on language, and in the district, even on immigration status, like none of those apply. If the parents can prove that the child is a resident of DC, and there's a whole set of provisions if the child is experiencing homelessness. In fact, DC last year created an equitable access preference system, which essentially means that if a child is experiencing homelessness, if a child is on nutritional like food assistance, like food stamps, or if a child is part of a foster care system, they get put to the front of the line in any charter school. Well, I'm sorry, in charter schools that choose this preference. So that means that in our school, which is a super high demand school, particularly for the younger grades, they would move to the top of the line or near the top of the line and get a seat. So yeah, that's where I think charters, particularly in DC, charters in other states I can't speak to, but there are no for-profit charters in DC, and I think it's a pretty well-regulated system, because I do see a lot of charters that get shut down because they're not providing a quality product.
So the maybe if we could kind of tailor this to the kids. I'm trying to think of ways, like you took a meandering route to where you are, and that's been a common theme I think we've seen with almost everyone that we've talked to so far.
Yeah.
Can you think back to, like, I don't know, critical decisions you made or opportunities that presented themselves and you took advantage? Like, what are some things that you did that you feel like you'd like other people to know about so they can also do, or mistakes that you made that you would warn people against?
Sure. I think the beaten path is an amazing path. Like, to be a doctor or to be a tech entrepreneur, not even an entrepreneur, just like working in your big tech company, like federal government, like those are jobs. Like if I think of like our macro community, we need people that are making bank, they can support institutions and have stability. That's fantastic. And someone once told me, like, medicine is the perfect job for the high achieving, risk averse individual. And that's true. Like, if you fit within that category, that might be the perfect thing. But then what I realized for myself is, once I got my acceptance letter, that was gratifying. And then at the same time, I thought, like, I think I can do more, just in terms of impact and in terms of like what my own community needs. And also like adding another desi to the doctor pool. Oh, I don't know, marginally, is that really helpful? And I was fortunate in my undergrad to I guess be guided by this philosophy that it's important to be well-rounded with a bulge. So the bulge is, whatever your major is, but to be well-rounded means like having some study abroad opportunities, and being able to immerse, like for me, immerse myself in some research work, which gave me the ability to have a competitive application when it came to the Fulbright. And I would say, like, I am a huge proponent of the US Fulbright program, and still am.
Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, and still am active in that community. So Senator Fulbright, when he started this program, like he himself was a Rhodes Scholar and understood like the importance of these once in a lifetime opportunities when you're in college or going to grad school, to go abroad and deeply immerse yourself in study. So, as a Rhodes Scholar, he went to Oxford. But when he came back and as a senator, the program he funded was more on like a public diplomacy thing, where it's like Americans go to a number of different countries, and people from a number of different countries come over here to study. Some at the undergraduate level, but most people that are coming in from overseas are actually coming for their PhD program, or they are super expert in an area and they want to come and write a book, but they need to do research for a year in America. So for me, that opportunity was to study at the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine. They had a joint program with the London School of Economics in health policy, financing, and like systems development. So
Did you overlap with Abbas Kanji when you were there?
I did not
I thought there was some
know.
connection between you and Abbas Kanji.
There is a connection. We overlap. I met him in DC, so I didn't even realize that he was in London.
Oh, okay. All right. I thought you were there at the same time. For some reason, I thought there was a connection there. Okay.
Yeah. So after my year, after being exposed to these studies, I was like more convinced that like clinical medicine wasn't where I wanted to be. And so when I came, I finished my studies, and then started working in corporate America, thinking that I need to build some skills of project management, and skills of like client management, and like how organizations work and function. That took me through a couple of different consulting roles until I came to a point where I was thinking, I think I've learned a lot, and now I need to hang my own shingle, like try some freelance things, like go back overseas, like that's where my heart is. Can I figure out what work I can do in the Middle East? And I was able to just create an LLC, a limited liability company, like anyone can pay $50 and create a company. And then I started doing some consulting work for a hospital that was run by an American out in the Emirates. And then it's just a lot of hustle. Like I loved Ali Asghar's interview. Like that was hysterical. Like he's full of hustle. So the hustle that I had was, how do I then widen my portfolio? And so I was doing some, like, South Africa is really interesting in that they wanted to create a national health insurance program, so like a Medicaid program for their entire country. And by the way, they're only a fraction of our GDP. So that was really exciting for me, and I was able to, like, I don't even know how I landed, like being able to do some freelance work for them. So I was working in Cape Town, working in Emirates, and then the Emirates people had a little affiliation in Bangladesh. All of this was happening 2010. I saw the World Cup from Bangladesh. It was a life-altering experience. It was so fantastic. But then I also realized, like, this is good, but I was at a point in my life where the project that I was on in Bangladesh was ostensibly like a maternal health project, but the real root of the problem was a cruddy girls' school that was just failing its kids. And so, like, at age 17, without any prospects, these girls would get married out, and then by 18 they would have a child, and they're already undernourished. And so, like, the problem was a really bad school system. And of course, there's always like this interplay between education and health and housing and all of that. But it was just like, this is really crystal. And at the same time, I thought, I need to work, I think, closer to my backyard. Like, the international stuff is good, but if I want to see more sustained change, I need to be within the environment, and I need to be within an organization to develop people. Like, up until this point, I was like scaling up organizations, and that was great. as a consultant, you can come in with a particular skill set and look and analyze and like help people go on a trajectory and then leave. But I get a lot of joy in like working with people for a while in a community and then seeing that change. And that's what like DC at the time, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, was making a lot of headway, like going from an abysmal graduation rate of 60% to like 80%. And things were like that narrative of inner city schools terrible, like and they're always underfunded and overcrowded and like no one knows what to do and everybody's moving out to the suburbs. That was beginning to change. And charter schools were a big part of that. They injected a level of competition. The school that I started and continued to work at, Two Rivers, was a parent-funded school. Like it was parents who came together and said, we need to do better. And we want a diverse school, a public school that has those features and amenities that the private schools have, and we can make it work. So I thought that was just super gratifying, and that's what allowed me to like I think because I had the fellowship, it gave me the credibility. Otherwise, like I couldn't just knock on someone's door and say, hey, look, I have this resume that's not related at all, but really cool skills. Like you need to have some sort of credibility and runway to be able to do that. And then like I was just very fortunate that the ED took a chance on me.
So you helped in founding this Two River School, or you came in after it was already there?
I came when it was 10 years old, so we'll turn 20 in a couple of years. Okay.
I've always been, you talked about consulting, and it blows my mind how I think I always think of these big companies and countries as being like having so many resources and minds and like everything kind of already figured out. And when I think of them like consulting with just like a single person like you, with your own like an LLC, which is probably just you, it wasn't even like a team.
No, yeah.
It doesn't make sense to me how like how could a country need someone like you or me to figure out things? How does that dynamic work?
How does that work?
And like you're not an expert in running countries, or you're not an expert in even like, I mean, have you founded a hospital, or have you built a hospital, or are you a healthcare provider? Then how can you consult a hospital and tell them how to do what they're supposed to do and make them do it better?
Yeah.
That's very confusing for me. How does consulting work?
Totally. Consultants, particularly if you're just a one-person operation, you're just there for like that one sliver of a thing, or it's like general like advice. It's like it's interesting for like the Emirates project. I was hired on first like to go live in country, and I was really tempted to, and then my wife got into a graduate school program, and it just didn't make sense for us to move to the Emirates at that point. So I just negotiated like I'll come out frequently, and the work that they needed was strategic planning. So that's a broad skill set. The CEO trusted me because on my resume were like the consulting companies that he was familiar with as a hospital executive when he was running a hospital in America. So there's the familiarity of like, okay, I know the types of skills he's going to bring. I know that in this particular, small maternity hospital, we just need a lot of different things. And part of it is like paving the future for the next 5 years. And what does that look like? And it's at a capacity, right? Like I could go and talk to different individuals, inject a different perspective, and take on some of the things that he just didn't have capacity to do. So it was like, it's a relatively safe bet. And it's, it's not a country, it's a person at the end of the day. For the South Africa project, a philanthropy, so like nonprofit works because the service that you're providing to someone is being funded by somebody else. So a philanthropy is working with the government of South Africa, particularly their Treasury Department, to be like, it seems like the help that you need is to understand how to mobilize different revenue sources to fund your healthcare system. We will contract with this development company. So Results for Development is this small DC boutique firm that's ex-World Bank people, McKinsey people. So people who've been around the block and really have expertise in this area. And then they look to me as another set of hands coming from a school that they're familiar with, who has done work on understanding how an informal economy can still pay for something like this. So related to my thesis work when I was a Fulbright. So it all connects, and it's not just like one person. We're part of a team, and it's just that particular thing.
I saw a couple of hands, Ahmed, Musa. And Musa posted a question. I think you might have answered it though. My aunt worked as a special education lawyer in DC, and she told us that public schools in DC were very low quality, unaccommodating, and underfunded. How does a charter school work around that or avoid that same issue?
Yes.
I don't understand the question.
Yeah. So it's a resource question. And as charter schools, like our charter school has 1,000 students. Our budget is nearly $30 million. We get to decide how to spend those $30 million. So that's a lot of autonomy and flexibility. We could spend it, a lot of it, on technology, which we don't. We for the longest time avoided going the route of one-to-one computing and all the fancy tablets and all of that, even though a lot of parents, particularly middle class wealthy parents, that's what they want, because that's what they equate with good education. But instead we spent a lot of money on people. We have an assistant teacher and a lead teacher in our classrooms at the younger school level. We have a special education teacher who toggles between 2 classrooms at the grade level for the most part. So that's a lot of support and help. Plus, the whole special education world is a really difficult space in terms of you need a level of expertise to help a child understand like their difficulty. It's dyslexia or decoding words, whatever. And at that moment, being able to push them along in a trajectory that makes steady progress and help them understand goals for themselves. And at the same time, because of our nation's history, like special education has a lot of compliance and legal just legal things that you need to do to stay above board, which if schools are not investing resources in special education hours properly, they can be sued. And then oftentimes they do, like DCPS, like our traditional public school, like every year, like it's whatever thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of dollars that go just in litigation because they are not complying with the law. So it's something that we take very seriously.
Are there is there advice you can give for kind of how people can kind of figure out what they want to do? I know it's particular to each person, but like what are some can you glean some keys from your experience that you found helpful, you think would be transferable to other people, most people?
Yeah, I think you have to spend a lot of time just sitting with yourself and just really understanding yourself. I talked
Meaning
about
what you're interested in.
Well, I think it's interest, but also like how risk averse are you? Like, if you know, if you have a particular passion in artificial intelligence, great. You can and you're good at it. Then you carve that path and you're in that path, and that's fantastic. And you might have a level of risk tolerance that allows you to be like, hey, a couple of friends and I, like, maybe we should just create our own startup. And that's your first step out of college. That's bold and gutsy, and like, if you know that you can handle that, and like in 2 years it's a total failure, that's totally fine. You can just dust yourself off and go on. That's terrific. But if you know, like, no, that, like, that thing of, like, you know, trapeze and starting here and going there, that's not me. Like, I want to be in a steady company and like work to my grad school, you know, get married. Like, I plan my path, and marriage is here, and having kids is, and like all of that, then you just need to be like very clear of that, or you'll just have something going on inside of you. Similarly,
Let me just check. So is that clear what he's talking about? Risk averse versus risk tolerant. Can you guys picture what that, you understand what that means? Like, you have a clear path, like medical school, like he was saying, is a very safe path. I mean, if you have the basic intelligence and interest in being a doctor, then there's a path set out for you. You go through the hoops, you take this test, MCAT, you get into medical school, there's a clear curriculum, you get a degree, then you pick a specialization, I don't know, whatever, residency. Like, there are all these different steps that are clear. And then at some point you end up in a career, and then even placement, and now you have a job. And so it's like yes, it's hard in its own way, but it's very easy in that someone else's, or the system has already kind of been laid out for you, and you just go through it and you're done. Whereas, like, what many of our guests have talked about, it hasn't been like that. And they've tried one thing and built skills, and then some door opened and they jumped to that and did something else. And it's been back and forth. And everything, I mean, I think in hindsight, all of the people we've talked to, by definition, I've selected people who have been successful or are successful now, so they've been able to make good use of all those opportunities. I'm sure, maybe there are people along the way who felt like, I want to quit, like nothing's working out for me, I'm tired of failing, or I don't know what I'm going to do, and then that kind of a path leads to failure, and I don't know, maybe worse than that. So that's I think what he's talking about with risk aversion and tolerance.
yeah, and
Does it go with, like, so you talk about personality, so do you feel, or can you remember feeling a sense of uncertainty along the way, that I don't really know what I want to do, this is not making enough money, or this is not satisfying enough?
all the time. I'll say that first job that I had it like, I started the week before 9/11, and then 2 months after that I was laid off. Like, the business dried up, and I think like the first thing going through my mind was, wait, why did I just tell the med school admissions people, like, I'm good, you can have your seat, and like give it to somebody else? Like, that would have been me, and life would have been so much clearer. And had I not had a wife who just did not flip out at that moment, like, things would have been really difficult. So, like, your support system is super, super important. Like, you need to have your own level of confidence, but sometimes your confidence is like, oh, like, I'm on the mat, and like, oh my God, what am I gonna do? That's where you need, like, your spouse, your parents, your brother to say, you're fine, alhamdulillah, like, we'll do the prayers, and by the way, there's money, like, let me send you a check, or like, let me make some calls, or whatever it is, to get you back in the saddle, and get you focused to, like, do the next thing.
So does that mean that this isn't, I don't know, is it better to go through a set path, a kind of a beaten path, than have to deal with all that grief? or is that grief in retrospect actually, beneficial somehow?
Like as believers, we feel that the qadar of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is, there, and bounties, like those doors open and you see bounties where you wouldn't have seen them. And of course, when I look back at all these years, like there are trials, but then like I wouldn't have had opportunities in these organizations or met these really interesting people, or when my work was really not at full capacity, I wouldn't have been able to take on leading this Muslim national nonprofit called American Muslim Health Professionals, which I was able to take in a direction that opened up our focus towards mental health issues, to try to destigmatize them within the Muslim community, to work with government officials to be like, hey, we have like all of these resources, like Muslim counselors and psychiatrists and psychologists, and we just don't have enough studies of our population. So like there are things, as well as like advocating for the Affordable Care Act. Like Muslims are not just, on Capitol Hill talking about Palestine or like this Muslim issue. Like we also care about and run so many free clinics across the country. It's like one of the biggest untold stories of like how many of our communities, big and small, just have like a small free health clinic that are staffed by or run by Muslims. So like, yeah, those opportunities would not have happened if I was just like, at capacity or on a particular path.
So we have a hadith about business. I think it's transferable to these other areas as well, but that doing business is highly recommended as a like one of the benefits is it builds your tawakkul. So that links to what you were just saying. We know our sustenance is guaranteed. We just have to do our part to make our efforts to work or to do whatever our duty is, and then if we fulfill our duties, then Allah will allow those gates to open and the sustenance comes to us. So we're not like, it's not the case that I work to earn my money. I work to kind of prove to Allah that I'm worthy of Him giving me whatever I need to survive and to thrive and all of that. Yeah, I wonder psychologically how, like, if the one who goes down the beaten path, if they also end up less mutawakkil, with less trust, because they're used to relying on the system. The system is so good that they don't really need God. Like they can have a perception they don't need God because the system's so good, and they think almost like it's a delusion.
Yeah, I did, like, when I think back to my college years, I think about wanting to avoid in my life golden handcuffs. Are people familiar with this
No.
concept of golden handcuffs? Like the idea behind golden handcuffs is you're in a gig or work or whatever that's just so nice. It's 9 to 5, you get a fat paycheck, there's so much security. You don't have to do like, too much. But the price you pay is like, you're like you have all these other restrictions. Like for instance, with the federal government in certain areas, like, if you're in the Department of Defense, for the last 5-8 years, you can't travel to Iraq. That's on the banned list. You can't travel to Iran. That's on the banned list. Like you have all of these restrictions. So yes, you have like all of this stuff going for you, and then you don't have your freedom in like this very important way.
What about free time and kind of balance in your life? How does that how maybe you were kind of working in the corporate sector, I think, in the beginning? Were you working in your corporate life? Was it typical like consulting and very hard hours and that kind of a thing. So how does that compare to what you or where you are now? Can you devote
Yeah,
time to all the things that you are interested in that you want to do that are not work related or earning money?
right, right. I think you know, the consulting life that I had, I enjoyed at that point. I was in my 20s. I got a chance to travel. I had a client in Anchorage. I got a chance to see moose. Alaska is beautiful. Like there's a lot to it. And then you know, Sheikh Rizwan and I, we talk about like family tourism. Like, mashallah, we have family everywhere. So like, oh, Ashura is going to come like while I'm traveling in this place. Why don't I just talk to this one person I know and like pop in and, you know, go to their center and meet with them? Like, there's just so much barakah just like being able to be in those spaces or experience Ramadan in a different community. I love that. But it is taxing. And there's like the mental strain of like when you're traveling, you still have your client duties, and then you get home and then you're exhausted, and then you need to like send out these things. And then if you have a boss who's like, well, where's that deliverable coming? Like, um, so those are the things that I don't miss. Like what I have now, alhamdulillah, is the ability to be in a senior leader position, which means I report directly to the head of the organization. The head of the organization is currently very sane, very calm, and very supportive. So I get a lot of latitude, and there's just conversation and thinking. Like when you're in the consulting space, sometimes you can't spend a lot of time thinking. You have to spend a lot of time doing. Like, oh, you're billing, and so like quickly assess and just do. Whereas when you're inside an organization, like you can be like, oh, I think this is what we need. Or let's read this book about race and equity, and like what sort of like are all of our people feeling a sense of belongingness in the organization? That's a huge thing for students. That's a huge thing for our adult community. How is gun violence ravaging our communities? Like, let's pause and like really think about that. And what should we do to support our own community? And I get a chance to develop some new different skill sets. Like when we had the Uvalde massacre, like, oh, it's a moment for us to think about like what are meaningful words that we can share to stabilize our own community. That's a tough thing to do. Like crisis communication, people like stake their own, you know, careers on that and like build that as a particular skill set. Or fundraising. Now I look at it, you know, like, I think Muslim organizations might be able to benefit from like this other model of fundraising. We don't have to lock the doors and like, brother, who's gonna give $10,000? So it's fun for me to like think about the verticals that I have control or the team that I am managing. So there's communication, there is fundraising, which includes like individual fundraising, but also like a family foundation or a large foundation like a Walton Family Foundation. And also think about government relations, like what are the policies that we need to advocate for as a school or as like a whole sector. And then community relations, like how do we make sure that our neighbors feel a part of our community? Like we're not just, you know, here and we serve particular kids, but like we are contributing to our patch of the city.
I've asked most of the questions today. Do you all have any? Yes, Mohammed.
So I had a question about since you're in the leadership role, I was wondering about how much control you or your school has over the curriculum, and whether I guess DCPS controls that, or like if you want to incorporate an Islamic curriculum, for Islamic education, how would you go about doing that, or if you could?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of like an Islamic curriculum, I think there is always capacity, particularly in our current national state of representation as part of a diversity, inclusion, equity stance. Like there are so many flourishing and new authors of Muslim books that I'm excited that they're out on the bookshelves in our local bookstores, and then they also come into our classrooms. So like Ibtihaj Muhammad's book as one example, or Malala, or because as a school, like the key is to use the language of the school. Like the language of the school is, we need books that are mirrors and doors. Mirrors, like kids need to be able to see themselves in the books that they read, or windows, like they need to be able to look at other communities as well. So that's how we can incorporate some level of Muslimness within the space. And there's also the idea that like each child should have an adult that they can connect with. And so like my Muslimness is not hidden. And so like if a child is fasting and it's Ramadan, like it's known that like staff members can look to me and be like, hey, can you just check in on Rashad and like just say hi, like on a daily basis. He really enjoys that. Fantastic. I can do that. I will say that charter schools, like you can make, as I said, a language immersion school. So not in the district, but in other places, there are Arabic immersion charter schools. Like that is totally legitimate, and you can do that. But again, that just takes a lot of time and effort and planning. Yeah.
But religion probably wouldn't fall under the charter mandate, right? A religious school,
Yeah, not religion, right? Not religion per se, no. Like
but as a kind of diversity and a kind of part of culture, and that
right.
it should be incorporated in a school like every other culture.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. Well, very good. Thank you so much, Khizer. Our time is up.
You're welcome.
Yeah, I'm really enjoying these conversations for myself. I hope the kids are also I'm getting good feedback from them, but I'm kind of getting an opportunity to talk to people I've known for a long time, and then get them to talk about their path and their career and these kinds of things.
Yeah, I've been enjoying the videos as well. I thought the one on Sunday was hysterical.
Yeah, alhamdulillah. All
Alhamdulillah.
right.
Okay.
Thank you so much. Inshallah, talk later.
Inshallah.
All right. Assalamu alaikum.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.